All right, thank you very much. For those of you, you know this guy, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Kelly. I'm the New York bureau chief here at Bloomberg. I also am the executive editor of Bloomberg Television, which puts me in the unique position of overseeing, in some ways, this guy who I wrote about.
But you don't want to say you're my boss.
I don't want to say that, no. That would make me very uncomfortable.
But actually, I've been your father's boss for a while.
That's
because
true.
I'm the chairman of the Smithsonian.
True.
He ran the National Zoo for a long time, which is owned by the Smithsonian.
It's all very awkward and incestuous and all tied up together. Thank you for pointing that out, by the way. And I'm certainly not your peer, but you do have this show on Bloomberg Television. Yes. The David Rubenstein Show, peer-to-peer conversations. So to bring you up to speed, for those of you who don't know about this show, which you should, we put together a little highlight reel. So let's take a look at that now.
Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? Why would you consider a job that has a smaller home and an older plane than you currently have?
That's a very tough question and a very good question.
What would you say?
All right, can we stop it actually right there for a second before we get any further?
Okay, so
I want to ask you about the president.
Good,
Sure.
thank you. This is good.
Before we get to
All right, this is good.
Well, I watch your interview shows, so I know
We're
how
gonna
to do
keep
some
going.
interviews. What is it like in the back room? What do you actually say to
presidents?
each other when your former presidents are getting together? Do you actually tell secrets that you never tell anybody else?
Audio difficulties. So can we go back to Trump for a second?
Sure.
How'd that come about?
Well, here's what
This
happened.
was when he was running for president.
Not yet. What happened was, over the years, my parents lived in a suburb of Baltimore called West Palm Beach, Florida. And when we would have family events, I would always want to do a nice place, so we'd do it at Mar-a-Lago, which you didn't really need to be a member of. You just need to have a credit card, so you show up for a special event. So I would do that, and many times I would have Donald Trump show up, and he would get a photo op with us, and so I got to see him a little bit, and he figured out eventually who I was, and very pleasant, didn't have any business with him, but I knew him a little bit. So as the president of the Economic Club of Washington, my job was to bring speakers in and interview them, and over the years, I was always looking for somebody who could be a draw, and somebody said, what about Donald Trump? I said, geez, I don't know if he'll really do it, but I wrote him a letter, and about 5 minutes later, he faxed back, said, I'll be there. So we worked out the date.
Faxed back, that's interesting.
It was faxed. He faxed it back. Came back through fax. I don't think he uses email. And so he came down, and we drew a big crowd. We normally have 500 people. We drew 800 people, maybe 850, as he might say, the biggest crowd we'd ever had. And what happened was, in the green room, he said to me, David, happy to do this. He said, ask me anything you want, but ask me 2 questions for sure. He asked me if I'm going to run for president. I said, President of what? He said, President of the United States. I said, Donald, you have no chance. Believe me, I know a lot about politics. No chance being President of the United States. What's the second question? He asked me if my hair is real and then you can feel it. I said, I don't know if I want to feel your hair, but I'll ask you about it. And so we had a very nice conversation. And then later, he told me that he liked the interview. It was one of the best he ever had. And he made me an honorary member of Mar-a-Lago subsequently. And then he told me it was the highest rated show in the history of C-SPAN. So I called the president of C-SPAN and said, where are the ratings? They said, there are no ratings. Nobody could know. So, but it might have been the highest rated show. I don't know. Could be. Who knows? So that was the interview.
Right. All right, can we go back to the, I want to make sure people see the rest of this. Can we do this? We may have to start. No. Now we're going to find out about how much Bitcoin's worth. How much is Bitcoin worth?
Whatever anybody's willing to pay for it at any given time, I guess.
Right.
But,
all right. If we don't do this, I have a lot of other questions I want to. Oh,
there we
here
go.
we go.
Okay.
All right. We're going to do this again. I'm not going to stop it again.
Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? Why would you consider a job that has a smaller home and an older plane than you currently have?
That's a very tough question and a very good question.
What would you say are the greatest pleasures that you have received, or what you're most proud of?
Okay, so these are good. Thank you. This is good. This is good.
Well, I watch your interview shows, so I know how to do some interviews. What is it like in the back room? What do you actually say to each other when your former presidents are getting together? Do you actually tell secrets that you never tell anybody else? Or
Yeah, generally we say, when's this program going to start and when's it going to end?
And then he'll say to me, give shorter answers.
Back to your current job. What is the greatest pleasure of being Speaker of the House? Can you think of one?
How much time do I have?
Right.
No.
Very few people in the world are known by one name. There's Oprah, there's Elvis, there's Jesus, very few people. But I mean,
There are a few others.
but suppose your name was just Mary or Jane.
It
you'd
wouldn't
think-
have worked.
You have said your secretary pays a higher tax rate than you do,
Yes.
right? And
Still
so you're
does.
in favor of changing that.
Some years ago, somebody from the White House called and said, would you mind having a tax named after you? And I said, well, if all the diseases have been taken away, why shouldn't I? I'll take a tax.
Why were you interested in being the head of McDonald's? Did you like McDonald's food, or you just, what was it?
You don't have to look at me, you don't have to talk to me, you can keep on walking, whatever you're doing. I just want to see his face for 3 minutes.
What about snack products? How are you trying to make those healthier?
A single-serve bag of Lay's has less salt than a slice of bread. So you should eat your bag of Lay's with a smile on your face.
I'm sure I would eat them with a smile on my face,
Yeah,
but I
it's-
wondered whether I gained some weight. You're the wealthiest man in the world for 20 years or more. How does it affect your life daily? People come up to you all the time and ask for money, or they expect you to buy them things.
You know, I think that President Bush would humbly, actually, he could talk trash, by the way, and he did with me. He challenged me. I was in the Oval Office with my family after the surge in Iraq, and he said, "So, General, when are you going to have the guts to ride a mountain bike with me?" And I said, "Mr. President, you have any idea who you're talking to?" I said, "I'm going to give you an experience that you can write off on your income tax as education."
Right. Okay. Did you ever do it with him?
I did, and I
is
was
he
glued.
good at it?
I was glued to it. He's terrific. Yeah, yeah, and he also knew the course. He had the best bike in the world. He had, and I had a borrowed clunker. I was a
Right,
road
okay.
biker, but Secret Service will ditch you if you try to pass them. So, but it was
I guess, yeah.
our
that's
son broke
challenging.
his thumb. I mean, this is a full contact sport when you ride with President Bush.
When you go to your annual shareholder meetings, do you get a standing ovation for what you've done? Or the
No,
people-
I get a lot of people asking me, hey, look, go come home and fix my computer.
Okay. You're now both former presidents, and what's the difference between being a former president and president? Now, one day you have the nuclear codes. You can send nuclear bombs off. Everybody is working for you. And the next day, when you leave office, you have no power. What was the transition like?
Nobody plays a song when you walk in the room anymore. I mean, I was lost for the first 3 weeks after I left office. I kept waiting for the music, you know.
Well, so I woke up in Crawford the day after the presidency, expecting someone to bring me the coffee.
Right.
Laura didn't bring the coffee.
There was the Iran-Contra scandal.
Yep.
New National Security Advisor Frank Carlyle came in, and he wanted you as his deputy.
And I said, Frank, it can't be that important. He says, it is that important. So then I said, okay, see if you can risk your entire career by saying the next sentence. I said, well, Frank, if it's that important, why doesn't the president call me? Half hour later.
You had a call from?
Hello, General Powell. This is Ronald Reagan. Yes, sir.
Would it be fair to say that you don't suffer from a lot of self-doubt? You seem to be very, I mean, I don't, I'm more like Woody Allen. I don't really know, what I should be doing. I'm not sure if I made a mistake here. You don't really have that issue so much.
Well, I probably do have that issue. I mean, I think a lot about different things.
Well, I went back to my childhood home not too long ago with my mother for
Yeah.
a TV show, and I knocked on the door, and I said, can we come in? I used to live here a long time ago, and they called the police. Suppose the next president said, those are pretty good ideas. Would you like to be my Secretary of Treasury? What would you say?
I'd say I'd ask David Rubenstein.
That's it.
So there you go. There's the highlight reel. Tune in to Bloomberg Television. So I have to ask you, you're several seasons in now. What have you learned from all these famous people that you've sat down and asked questions to?
Everybody has an interesting story, and the trick is to try to get people relaxed so they're willing to talk about their background, and everybody realizes that there's been luck involved in their emerging from modest backgrounds to national leader, political leader, business leader. So everybody wants to talk about their story more or less, and I think you can get people relaxed and get them to talk about their background. I think it makes an interesting story. People always want to listen about how people became successful, so when you can talk about that with somebody and they can say, here's how I became a leader, this is what I overcame, this is the things I learned, I think it's interesting to people.
Who surprised you the most?
Well, there's no doubt Donald Trump. I didn't think he'd be elected president of the United States. I'd say that. But I think they're all pretty good. I think nobody I disappointed with. I think what I try to do is do it in what my style is, as some people have seen it, is this. I try to prepare by knowing the facts pretty well, know the people's background. And then I outline the interview in my writing it out, and I kind of memorize it. And what I try to do is not use notes, because I try to realize that if you have notes, your eyes will inevitably look down. And as soon as you look down, you lose the eye contact with the person. You don't look like you're having a conversation. And I always try to make people look reasonably good. I mean, I'm not a journalist, as I say. I'm not trying to embarrass people, put them on a hard spot, make news that they didn't really want to make. So I think they feel comfortable and they're relaxed, and they don't really feel I'm going to try to threaten them or embarrass them. And therefore, they often tend to say more things than they might have otherwise said because they're relaxed.
I'm going to put my notebook to the side
Okay.
now.
Put it down. I mean, like, see, the truth is, I prepare the questions. So let's suppose I prepare 40 questions. I've written them out myself. I've done them the way my mind works. So if I'm doing the interview and I remember 35 of the 40, nobody's going to know in the audience I forgot 5 questions.
Right.
And so it's not like anybody's going to be upset. And it just, I think it works better. When you have notes in front of you, you usually look down. When you look down, it just looks different. At least my style is that way.
Right. So let's start the broader conversation in your current hometown. You grew up in Baltimore, but you live in Washington, or
Right.
when you are at home, you were in Washington, which
Right.
is not that frequently. You still travel 200 plus days a year?
That's correct.
What's going on in Washington right now?
Well, Washington is a city that is bitterly divided, as it was under President Obama and to some extent under George W. Bush. I worked in Capitol Hill in the late 1970s, and I would say the Democrats and Republicans then tried to work together and get bills done. Today, you just don't see any of that. I started a program about 5 years ago to bring Democrats and Republicans together for dinner, at least, where I bring in a great American historian, I interview them, and we have a dinner, and the Democrats sit with the Republicans, and they love it because they say they rarely ever get to have contact with people from the other house or the other party. Right now, members of Congress are not there that much because they're out raising money all the time, and it's not as good as it used to be, in my view. Washington is not likely to change in terms of the bitter divide anytime soon. I think the president has really aligned himself with the Republicans, as you would expect. The Democrats are basically waiting for the midterm election. They think they're going to do very well. And if they gain control of the House, it's going to be very difficult for the president the next 2 years, I think.
So barring that sort of change, is there anything, as an observer of Washington, as you say, for a long time, you worked in the Carter White House, is there, if you could wave a magic wand, or if you could tell them to do one thing to come back together, what would it be?
Well, the things that I think would be great to do would be eliminate money from politics. The Congress tried that years ago, and the Supreme Court more or less struck it down. They have to spend so much time raising money that they really, and they don't need the money that much. Most incumbents usually win, but they want money because they think the more money they have, it'll threaten other people or make other people afraid to run against them. Also, they use money to buy leadership positions. You can give money to your peers, and maybe that helps get you elected to a leadership position because it's not by seniority anymore in most cases. So I think the money is terrible. Secondly, they're not there that much. It used to be they were there 5 days a week, and they really, would get to know each other. They're just not there that much. And secondly, or thirdly, they don't do as many congressional delegations abroad called CODELs, where they would travel and bond with each other. Because going overseas now gets heavily criticized. And I guess the internet and the social media has made it impossible to do anything in secret. So everything they do is known, and therefore some things that might look good for one party might not be done by somebody from the other party. They just are afraid of being primary. That's what their big fear is. They're being primary, which means that somebody will run against them on the right if they're Republicans or on the left if they're Democrat. And therefore, there's nothing in the middle anymore.
So let's talk about the economy domestically and globally. In your business, you obviously have to keep a pretty close eye on that from a deal-making perspective. What's your sense of where we are in the economic cycle? How worried are you at this point?
Well, a broken clock is right twice a day, as they say. So I've been saying for years there's going to be a slowdown and there'll be a recession. And for years I've been wrong. So I'm going to keep saying it, and someday I'll be right. I don't know when that's going to be. Since World War II, we've had on average a recession in the United States every 7 years. Not exactly 7 years, but on average. The longest time we've gone without a recession was from 1991 to 2001, roughly 10 years. That's about 120 months. We're now 108 months into a growth cycle. The last recession ended in June of 2009. At some point, there will be some slowdown. I don't see it happening right now. No economist is predicting it for this year that I'm aware of, and even next year, I don't see it. But at some point, there'll be a slowdown. Now, I don't know what will cause it. I couldn't have predicted the last recession, really, that it would be caused by, let's say, the subprime mortgages being undone. I think one thing that people should realize is that what we've really done over the last 10 years is this. The same amount of indebtedness exists in the United States today as did 10 years ago. The same amount of indebtedness, but it's shifted. It used to be that the 60% of it was held by the private sector and 40% by government. Now it's 60% by government and 40% by the private sector. So the private sector has delevered, government has levered up. And let me give you an example. When I left the White House in 1981, the U.S. debt of the United States government was roughly $500 billion. And that was thought to be very, very high. It's now 21 trillion. And we are adding enormous amounts every year. This year's fiscal budget outlay will probably be at a $900 billion annual deficit. Next year, 1.2 trillion. And the difference is that we seem to be out of control because it's not likely that it's going down. It's going to go up because the entitlement programs are not being chopped. We're increasing defense spending. Today, all the money we bring into the U.S. government just pays basically for the entitlement programs and a little bit more, but not much more. So we really have to figure out how we're going to deal with the government debt problem. If we don't deal with it at some point, I think that could be the cause of a recession. Right now, Wall Street doesn't seem to be worried about it. The market's doing quite well. So nobody is really worried about the government debt. And it's not just federal debt, it's state debt and pension debt. So at some point, that could be the biggest cause of a slowdown. But I don't know when that will occur, and it might not be for a couple of years.
So you move around the world a lot, as we've alluded to. You talk to the world's biggest investors. What are they worried about?
Well, everybody is worried about the fact that you're taught that there's a recession that comes every once in a while. And the lesson of the last recession is if you're over-levered, you can be in trouble. But if you're very smart and you're willing to take some risk, you buy your own debt back at a discount, or if you hold on to your asset long enough, it'll come back. So people are just wondering when this slowdown is going to occur, and are they buying things when the music is going on and the music's going to stop? Are they going to be caught standing? So I think everybody's worried. On the other hand, people don't want to miss out on great deals. So people saw in the technology world that there was a company called Google, a company called Facebook, and a lot of people missed out on those opportunities. So now you see so many technology unicorns because everybody's afraid that they'll miss the next Facebook or Google. At some point,
you missed out on Facebook.
I did. My son-in-law-to-be told me about it when he was in college, and I said, this will never get anywhere. It's a dating service for college kids. I've looked at those kind of deals before. They don't get anywhere. I was wrong. If I put in the initial $10 million, that's worth about $35 billion today. So that was a mistake. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes.
But Beats was one you got right.
Beats is one that we did get right. That's a company that was started by Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, who was, I didn't really know rap that well at the time. Now I'm a rapper. But,
yeah, right. Now you are deeply into it. Yeah.
Well, I did a rap for Carlyle Video once, and they hired a young African-American in Washington, D.C., 21 years old, to teach me how to rap. And he wrote out the rap song, and he said, look, this will take 5 minutes to do. It took me 4 hours to learn how to do it. And he said later, Mr. Rubenstein, you're the whitest man I've ever met. So we were trying to do beats. They thought because I'm chairman of the Kennedy Center, I would have some patina of entertainment knowledge. They sat me down with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. And at the end of the meeting, we agreed that we would ultimately probably invest in. We did buy 50% or almost 50% of the company for about $500 million. Dr. Dre stood up. And he was big, he's like 6'4", 6'5", and he looked really chiseled. I kind of felt, really out of shape. And I stood next to him, and I said, "You look like you must work out a lot." He says, "Yes, 4 hours a day." He said, "How much you do?" I say, 4 hours a year, but that's in a good year. Yeah. We did that deal, and we doubled our money, and it worked out pretty well.
Sorry, I got you off track, but you were talking about technology companies.
Well, technology companies are everybody wants to be in the ground floor of whatever might be the next Facebook or Google or whatever it might be. Investors are concerned that prices that are being paid are high. The average EBITDA multiple or cash flow multiple paid for a buyout before the Great Recession was around 9.7 times. It rose up from let's say 30 years ago to maybe 6 or 7 times to 9.7, almost 10 times. Today, it's probably 11.5 times. So people are paying more. Now, the cost of debt is lower. But the major change that has occurred is investors are willing to accept lower rates of return. When I first started Carlyle with my partners, I think investors wanted 20% net, and maybe they could get 25% net if you were lucky, but a base case would be 20% net. Today, I think investors are happy to take 14, 15% net because they realize there's so much competition, people are paying higher prices. But today, you can get 15% net on a private equity deal. That's considered pretty good.
Right. So, geopolitically, how much are you worried? You look at North Korea, you look at Iran, you look at the Italian elections.
Well, if you go back in any period of time, there's always some geopolitical concerns. I'd say a year ago, North Korea seemed more dangerous than it does today. As we talk today, there's going to be a summit. Who knows what will come out of it? But the talk seems to be pretty positive. Iran, even though the United States has more or less pulled out of the agreement, the Iranians are still complying with the agreement. So it may turn out that maybe they'll make some more concessions, and maybe the U.S. will go back into it. I don't really see anything that's immediately going to cause us to go into any military confrontation. Now, you don't know. Some of these things come unexpectedly. Right now, Ukraine seems to be relatively quiet. Syria, I wouldn't say is quiet, but I wouldn't say it's as bad as it's been. I think Iraq has been worse than it is today. So I don't really see anything that today I could say this is a geopolitical problem, and this is the one that's going to cause us to go into some kind of recession.
Right. I want to spend the last couple minutes that we have talking a little bit about philanthropy. You've been increasingly vocal about where and how you are donating your money. You're a signatory of the Giving Pledge, if I have that right. You have espoused what I think you call patriotic philanthropy, Washington Monument, and a number of other.
Right.
You recently bought another copy of the Declaration
I
of
did,
Independence?
James Madison's copy.
How many do you need?
Do I need?
Yeah.
Well, I don't
How many
need-
do you want?
Well, it's not that I want or need any of them. All these will go to the institutions. I don't have anything in my house on my walls.
I know. I'm teasing.
So I just put them in place so people can see. And the reason I do this, most of my philanthropy is, like many people's, into education and medical research, because those are areas that clearly can make the world a better place in so many ways. But I have this little niche in patriotic philanthropy where I'm trying to do things that remind people of our history, because I think Americans know so little about it. We don't teach civics very much anymore in junior high school or high school. You don't really have to take an American history course in most colleges. In fact, you can major in history in 80% of our colleges and still not have to take an American history course. I am convinced that the average American native-born citizen could not, without taking a test to prepare, be able to pass the citizenship test that an immigrant has to pass, because we don't really know so many things. For example, Annenberg Institute recently did a survey that showed that 3/4 of Americans cannot name the 3 branches of government. 3/4 of Americans cannot name the 3 branches of government. And it turned out that more than 1/3 of Americans cannot name a single right, not a single right protected by the First Amendment. And it turned out that almost 10% of American college graduates think that Judge Judy is on the United States Supreme Court, which, as I hesitate to say, is not yet the case. But I just think that what I try to do is say, I'll have these original documents of the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, put in places, and then make sure that Monticello or Montpelier or Washington Monument or Mount Vernon are in good shape. More people will go there. If they go to these places and they view the documents, they view these places, they might be inspired to go back and learn more about history. And if they learn more about history, maybe we won't make some of the mistakes we made before. We'll have a more informed citizenry, and a more informed citizenry will hopefully make a better democracy. That's the theory. Time will tell whether I'm right or not.
So what's the next leg of your philanthropy?
Well, what I intend to do is do more in education, but in patriotic philanthropy, that's a narrow part of what I do. I'll probably buy some more documents or historic books and ultimately put them on display. And there's some other monuments and memorials that I'm working on that I think can be used, fixed up. So, for example, take the Lincoln Memorial. That memorial needs some repair, let's say, and I agreed to put up the money for that. And then what we're going to do is build an underground education center about Lincoln there, so people can go there. They won't just see Lincoln, but they'll actually learn about Lincoln in this education center. And when I was announcing this about a year or so ago, it turned out it was snowing. We did it in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and it was covered live on C-SPAN. And so I'm sitting there with the head of the Park Service, and I'm
the ratings, by the way, were not as good as when you interviewed Trump. for that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm getting ready to make my little speech about why I'm doing this. It's snowing, and the Park Service said, "Look, we don't care about snow. We're the Park Service." So I'm sitting there. All of a sudden, I get a call on my phone, and it's my mother. She said, "David, put your hat on," because I was, she was watching the C-SPAN. She said, the snow was coming out. She said, "Put your hat on." So I had to put my hat on. But it's always good to have your mother remind you of these things.
That's true. That is true. So give us, in the last few seconds that we have, give us a preview for what's coming up on the David Rubenstein Show, peer-to-peer conversations on Bloomberg Television.
Well, we've taped a few that haven't yet been broadcast, and they will be soon. But one that I did recently was I served as chairman of the board at Duke University for a number of years, my alma mater. I went there on a scholarship, but not a basketball scholarship, I assure you. Recently, after I stepped down as a chair, I decided to stay involved with the school, so I went back to this year's commencement. And this year's commencement, the speaker was the graduate of the Duke Business School, Tim Cook. So I interviewed him in front of a number of people, and that'll be, I think, the air in a few weeks, and that'll be, it's a very interesting interview about his life and so forth. And so that one has been taped.
So
and
give
done.
these fine people a preview. What's one of the more interesting things that he told you?
Well, he told me that I don't know how to use my iPhone appropriately, and because one time I was somewhere with him on a board in China, and I said, "Look, I can't get this iPhone to work," and he said, "David, I'll fix it for you, but normally I don't do tech support for people, but for you I'll do it." So he got it to work. He's better than I am at that. But he actually has a very interesting story. He came from very modest circumstances, and when Steve Jobs passed away, many people thought the stock would go down, but the truth is the stock has more than doubled. The stock was valued about $350 billion when Steve Jobs died in, I think, 2011. And now the stock is about $930 billion in market cap. So he's done a spectacular job. Now, obviously, a lot of it was done by other people as well, but he's done a pretty good job of making this perhaps the first company that's going to be worth $1 trillion.
So as you've talked to all these peers, what have you learned that you've employed either in your own life personally, in your philanthropy, or in your business world?
Well, I don't know if I've learned anything I've employed directly. I do think that the people that I've interviewed who have been the most impressive are the ones that have a sense of humor about their lives and have some humility. And this is not an age when humility is maybe valued as much, but I do think that humility is something that all these people have. When you meet with Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, they've obviously accomplished a great deal, but they make fun of their lives and the situations they're in, and there's many things you just don't expect of them. So, for example, Bill Gates, it wasn't on the show, but he told me, his wife told me this once. Bill Gates is taking his daughter to college the first time. She went to Stanford. She's now, I think, graduated, and so the roommate wasn't told in advance who the roommate was going to be. So there the parents are. And the parents are dropping their daughter off, and there is Bill Gates with his daughter, and they're a little surprised. And then it turned out that they didn't have all the stuff, as everybody knows. When you go to college, you drop your kid off, you don't have all the stuff. So they said, we have to go to Lowe's to get it. So you have a picture of Bill Gates driving to Lowe's and shopping around looking for the stuff. And then, of course, when he got back to the dorm room, this was the wrong stuff. He wasn't sure if he should take it back for a refund or not. But, how would you like to be walking around Lowe's, standing in the checkout line? There's Bill Gates checking out stuff. So, the people like to make fun of there's unusual situations, and that's what a lot of the interviews I have do.
Billionaires, they're just like us.
Right.
Thank you very much
All right,
for
thank you
spending
very
some
much.
time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.